Good evening, everyone. Let's talk about something we don't celebrate enough: the power of being alone. You see, the world is loud. It teaches us to hustle, to stay busy, to constantly surround ourselves with people, likes, and validation. And somewhere along the way, we begin to fear silence and solitude. But what if I told you that solitude isn't the enemy? What if I told you it's one of the most powerful spaces you will ever occupy? Being alone is not the same as being lonely. It is in solitude that we meet the rawest version of ourselves, the one stripped of applause, stripped of filters, stripped of distractions. And that version of you? That's the one with the power to change everything. We often look to others to tell us who we are: friends, social media, critics, even fans. But when the lights go down and the world quiets, the only voice that matters is your own. Being alone is where you face your fears. It's where you sit with your doubts and learn to rise from them. It's where you realize you don't need a crowd to validate your worth. Paul Washer once said that the mark of a true follower is not the crowds they draw, but the cross they carry. And I think that applies far beyond religion or belief. It applies to all of us. The cross we carry could be our purpose, our pain, our passion. And sometimes it's a weight we carry alone. Being alone is often misunderstood. In a world that's constantly connected through social media, 24/7 news, group chats, endless notifications, solitude can feel almost unnatural. We're conditioned to believe that being surrounded by people, by noise, by activity is a sign of success or happiness. And when we're not, we feel like something's wrong. But there is a profound difference between being alone and being lonely. They are not the same. Loneliness is a feeling. It's a sense of isolation, of being unseen, unheard, or unloved. It comes with a weight of sadness and often helplessness. But being alone, choosing to step away from the noise, is an act of strength. It's a conscious decision to center yourself, to reconnect with your own thoughts, and to rebuild from the inside out. In fact, some of the most powerful transformations happen in solitude. Think about it. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly surrounded by a crowd. It goes into a cocoon, alone, hidden, silent. And in that stillness, it changes entirely. People often romanticize the end result, the beauty, the wings, the flight, but they forget the power of that quiet, lonely space that made it possible. The same applies to us. In solitude, we are forced to face who we really are. There are no filters, no applause, no distractions, just us. And that can be uncomfortable because it's easier to stay busy than to confront the questions we've buried under noise. Who am I when no one's watching? What do I want when no one is telling me who to be? What do I believe when I'm not performing for approval? Being alone holds up a mirror. And if you're willing to look into it, really look, you'll find truths you can't discover in a crowd. You'll find pieces of yourself that got lost in people-pleasing or in trying to live up to expectations that were never truly yours. You'll find pain that needs healing, dreams you forgot, and strength you didn't know existed. And here's something beautiful. The more time you spend in your own company, the more you learn to enjoy it. You begin to understand your rhythms, your moods, your patterns. You start making choices that align with who you are, not who the world wants you to be. You gain clarity, confidence, self-respect. But let's be honest, it's not always easy. Solitude requires courage. It requires the willingness to feel uncomfortable. It forces you to stop running from yourself. And in a culture that romanticizes being booked and busy, choosing quiet can feel rebellious, radical even. But it's in that quiet that you build an unshakable foundation, because when you truly know yourself, you become less affected by outside opinions. You stop chasing validation. You stop needing people to tell you that you're enough. You just know that you are. And from that place of inner stability, everything changes. You start showing up differently in relationships, in work, in life. You stop performing and start living. You become intentional with your time, your energy, your boundaries, and perhaps most importantly, you become selective about who gets access to your world. Not everyone will understand your solitude. Some might see it as sadness, others might misinterpret it as arrogance or aloofness. But those who've embraced it, who've sat with their own silence, will recognize it for what it is: power. There's a quiet strength that comes from being comfortable alone, a kind of peace that doesn't depend on anyone else's presence or absence. And once you've felt that peace, You won't settle for chaos just to fill a void. So no, being alone is not something to be ashamed of. It's not a weakness to fix. It's a space to honor. It's where you meet the most important person in your life, you. And when you know yourself, truly know yourself, you walk through the world differently. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're no longer afraid of the questions. And that right there is the power of being alone. Self-discovery is one of those ideas we all admire from a distance. We read about it in books, hear it in speeches, post quotes about it, but few of us truly experience it. Why? Because self-discovery doesn't happen when life is easy, loud, or full of distractions. It happens in silence. It happens in solitude. When you take a step back from the crowd and allow the world to quiet down, you start to hear something most people miss: your own voice. Think about how often we're influenced by outside opinions. From the moment we're born, we're being shaped by family, culture, media, school, and eventually social media. We're told what success looks like, who we should love, what we should wear, how we should act. And somewhere along the way we internalize these voices, we start thinking they're our own, but they're not. When you're constantly surrounded by people, by noise, by expectations, you never get the chance to separate their voices from yours. That's where solitude comes in. When you choose to be alone, not out of sadness, but out of strength, you strip away the filters. You give yourself permission to simply exist without performance. Solitude creates space to breathe, to think, to question. And those questions aren't always comfortable. Am I happy in this job? Is this relationship healthy? What do I even want from life? These questions don't come up when you're distracted. They rise in silence and they demand honesty, not for anyone else's sake, but for yours. And here's what's amazing. When you start listening to your own voice, you realize how wise, how powerful, and how worthy you are. You realize you've had answers inside you all along. You were just too busy or too scared to hear them. You begin to discover what actually makes you feel alive. Not what gets the most likes or the biggest applause, but what resonates deep in your bones. That's the kind of truth that doesn't shake when the world does. Self-discovery isn't about reinventing yourself into someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's about peeling back the layers of people-pleasing and pretending and saying, this is me, fully, authentically, unapologetically. That version of you, the raw, unfiltered one, is the foundation of real confidence. Not the kind that's loud and showy, but the kind that's grounded, graceful, and unbreakable. And it's in this state of deep knowing that you become a force. You stop being reactive and start being intentional. You stop comparing your path to others because you're too focused on walking your own. You begin to set boundaries that honor your peace. You begin to attract people and opportunities that align with your values, not because you're trying, but because authenticity has its own gravity. None of this happens overnight. And it's not always pretty. Sometimes self-discovery looks like sitting in your room at 2 a.m. crying, because you're finally confronting things you've buried for years. Sometimes it looks like distancing yourself from people who no longer align with your truth. Sometimes it's terrifying. Because when you discover who you really are, you realize how much of your life was built on who you're not. But that realization isn't the end, it's the beginning. It's the moment you stop living on autopilot and start living with intention. And the beauty of it, once you've found that version of yourself, no one can take it away. Not opinions, not rejection, not failure. Because you've built your identity on something unshakable, truth. And here's something even more powerful. The more you know yourself, the more you start to understand others. When you've sat with your own shadows, you stop judging people for theirs. You become more compassionate, more patient, more real. You realize everyone's just trying to figure themselves out, just like you. And that realization creates connection, the kind that's deeper than surface level. So yes, solitude can be scary. It can feel like emptiness at first. But if you sit in it long enough, that emptiness becomes space. And in that space, something incredible happens. You meet yourself. Not the version the world taught you to be, but the real you. And once you've met that person, life changes. Forever. Validation is something we all crave at some point in our lives. It's natural. As human beings, we're wired to want connection, affirmation, and love. From the time we're children, we look to others, parents, teachers, friends, for signs that we're doing well, that we're accepted, that we matter. But here's where it gets tricky. When we grow up, continuing to depend on external validation to define our worth, we hand over our power. And the truth is, real confidence, real peace comes when you stop waiting for someone else to tell you you're enough and start believing it for yourself. In a world obsessed with likes, follows, compliments, and praise, it's easy to lose sight of who we really are. We become performers even without realizing it. We learn which parts of us get applauded, which parts are easier to hide, and we shape ourselves to fit those expectations. But the danger in constantly chasing validation is that it becomes a moving target. One day people love you, the next day they don't. One moment you're trending, the next you're irrelevant. If your self-worth is based on that, you'll never find peace. You'll always be reaching, always adjusting, always questioning your value based on other people's reactions. When you're alone, truly alone, you start to notice these patterns. You begin to see how much of your life has been influenced by approval seeking, the way you dress, the way you talk, the decisions you've made, not because they were right for you, but because you thought they would please someone else. And when that realization hits, it can be jarring, but it's also liberating, because once you see the game, you no longer have to play it. That's the power of solitude. In those quiet moments with yourself, you realize that the only validation that truly matters is your own. Not because you're arrogant, but because you understand that no one else is living your life. No one else feels your dreams, your fears, your soul the way you do. So why should their opinion carry more weight than your own? Learning to validate yourself is a process. It starts with tuning into your own voice. What do you think of your work, your choices, your life? Can you look in the mirror and say, I'm proud of me? Can you sit in your truth, even if no one claps for it? That's the real test of self-belief. Showing up for yourself even when the world is silent. And here's what's amazing. When you begin to do that, when you start to validate your own worth, something shifts. You stop seeking approval. You stop shrinking or performing. You start showing up in your authenticity. And ironically, that's when the right people start to notice you, not because you're trying, but because your energy changes. Confidence, when it's real, is magnetic. But here's the thing, not everyone will get it. Some people are so used to the version of you that played small to make them comfortable, that when you step into your power, they'll feel threatened. Let them. You're not here to fit in, you fully, loudly, unapologetically. Validating yourself means trusting your instincts. It means being okay with standing alone if it means standing in truth. It means making decisions that honor your peace even if no one else understands them. And most of all, it means knowing deep in your soul that you are worthy, not because of what you do, but simply because of who you are. No one else gets to define your worth. Not your past, not your critics, not your failures. You define it. You declare it. And once you do, once you begin living from that place, life becomes lighter. You stop trying to prove yourself. You stop apologizing for taking up space. You stop performing and start living. And the beautiful part, the more you validate yourself, the less you need others to do it for you. Compliments become a bonus, not a necessity. Praise becomes appreciation, not oxygen. You start living from a place of fullness, not lack. So in a world that's constantly telling you to seek approval, choose something radical. Choose self-circumnation. Choose inner peace. Choose to trust your own voice more than the crowd's. Because the truth is, the world may applaud you today and forget you tomorrow. But your relationship with yourself, that lasts forever. And that relationship deserves to be rooted in love, truth, and unwavering self-respect. Purpose and pain, two of the most powerful forces in human life, often walk hand in hand. And the journey through both can feel lonely, deeply lonely. Because no matter how many people surround you, no one else can fully feel what you feel. No one else can carry what you carry. That's the weight of purpose. That's the ache of pain. And it's also where the transformation begins. We live in a world that tells us to avoid pain at all costs, numb it, bury it, distract from it. We glorify ease, success, the highlight reel. But what we don't often talk about is the behind the scenes, the heartbreak, the nights you cry yourself to sleep, the moments you question everything. And yet, that's where purpose is born, not in the spotlight, not in the applause, but in the struggle. Pain has a way of stripping everything away, the noise, the pretenses, the expectations, until you're left with just you, raw, real, broken maybe, but honest. And in that place, when everything feels dark and uncertain, a small spark starts to rise, the spark of something bigger than you, a sense that your suffering has meaning, that your trials are shaping you, molding you, preparing you for something you can't yet see. That's what purpose feels like at first. Not like a grand, inspiring vision, but like a whisper that won't leave you alone. It shows up in the questions you can't shake, the ache that doesn't go away, the feeling that there's something more for you, even if you don't know what it is yet. And when you start walking toward it, you often find yourself alone, not because people don't care, but because your journey is yours. And sometimes no one else can walk it with you. Paul Washer once said, "The mark of a true follower is not the crowds they draw, but the cross they carry." That applies not just to faith, but to life itself. Your cross might be the story you've survived, the trauma you've healed from, the mission burning inside you. And here's the thing about that kind of purpose. It won't always be comfortable. In fact, most times it won't be, because real purpose requires sacrifice. It asks you to face your deepest wounds, your fears, your limitations, and keep moving anyway. Purpose also doesn't come with a crowd. In the beginning, it's lonely. You may feel misunderstood. You may doubt yourself. You may lose relationships, opportunities, and comfort because of it. But what you gain is something far more valuable. Alignment, integrity, the peace of knowing that your life means something. Not because others say it does, but because you know it does. That kind of clarity can only be found when you embrace both the pain and the solitude that comes with it. It's in that sacred space that strength is born. Not the loud, aggressive kind, but the quiet, steady kind. The kind that builds unshakable resilience. The kind that allows you to stand alone, not in defiance, but in truth. And make no mistake, your story matters. Your pain is not wasted. The things you've walked through, the battles you've fought silently, the days you kept going when no one knew how hard it was. That's your strength. That's your wisdom. That's your power. And one day, it becomes someone else's survival guide. Your purpose isn't just for you, it's for someone you may never meet, who will find courage in your example, in your honesty, in your life. But you don't get to that place by skipping the pain or avoiding the solitude. You get there by walking through it, by sitting in the dark long enough to realize you can be your own light, by trusting that your journey, no matter how lonely or difficult, is shaping something sacred inside you. So when you feel like you're carrying something heavy, something the world doesn't understand, know this: you're not lost. You're being led. And even if no one claps for your process, even if no one sees your quiet becoming, keep going. Because your pain is pointing to purpose, and your purpose is powerful beyond words. Let it break you open. Let it refine you. Let it lead you, even if it leads you alone. Because in the end, the weight you carry becomes the message you share. And that message, that's how you change the world. The moments we spend in solitude are often the ones that shape us the most. It's not in front of crowds, not under the spotlight, but in the quiet, when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, that true strength is built. We often look at strong, confident people and think they were born that way, that they've always had it all figured out. But the truth is, most of them have spent long, difficult hours in silence, in struggle, in solitude, growing, healing, becoming. Preparation doesn't always look glamorous. In fact, it rarely does. It looks like getting up early to work on your craft while the rest of the world sleeps. It looks like staying in on a Friday night to reflect, to read, to plan. It looks like crying on the floor because the pressure feels too heavy, and still waking up the next day to try again. Real impact doesn't come from talent alone. It comes from discipline, from consistency, from the willingness to be uncomfortable in the name of growth. Solitude is the gym of the soul. It's where we train for the moments that will define us. It's where our character is tested and our resilience is built. Because when you're alone, there's no audience to impress. There's no need to perform. There's just you and the work. And that's where the magic happens. In solitude, you learn who you are without the opinions, without the applause, without the distractions. You learn to hold yourself accountable, to motivate yourself, to show up even when there's no reward. That's where leaders are born. That's where purpose takes root. That's where clarity comes. People often say, I'll be ready when the opportunity comes. But the truth is, you have to become ready before the opportunity arrives. You don't rise to the occasion, you fall back on your preparation. And that preparation happens in the shadows, in the background, when no one else sees the hours, the heartbreak, the effort. And let's be honest, sometimes it feels like nothing's happening. Like all your effort is invisible, like no one notices your growth, like your dreams are too far away and your work is going unnoticed. But that's the nature of the process. Seeds don't bloom overnight. They spend time in the dark, hidden beneath the soil, growing roots, strong roots, and when the time is right, they rise. Not because they forced it, but because they were prepared. You are that seed, and the time you spend in solitude isn't wasted. It's preparing you, it's deepening you, it's equipping you for what's to come. So don't rush it. Don't resent it. Embrace it. Because the stronger your foundation, the higher you can rise. When you understand that solitude is a season of preparation, you stop fearing it. You stop filling every silent moment with distractions. You start to appreciate the stillness. You realize that being alone doesn't mean being behind. It means being in progress. It means something is happening beneath the surface, even if the world can't see. And here's something powerful. Once you've trained in solitude, once you've found your strength in the quiet, you're no longer shaken by noise. You're no longer swayed by criticism or applause. You become steady, grounded, focused. Because you didn't build your strength for show. You built it for impact. When you finally step into your moment, when your voice is heard, when your work is seen, when your light is undeniable, you'll be ready, not because it was easy, but because you've done the inner work, you've weathered the storms, you've fought the doubt, and you've chosen to show up day after day, even when no one was watching. So let the world sleep on you. Let the silence stretch. Let the process take its time, because when preparation meets opportunity, the world won't know what hit it. Your solitude isn't punishment, it's preparation. And one day you'll look back and realize that the quiet seasons were the most powerful ones of all. There's a quiet kind of confidence that comes from knowing you can stand alone. Not because you want to isolate yourself, not because you don't value connection, but because you've discovered something incredibly powerful. Peace within your own presence. In a world that constantly tells you to belong, to blend in, to be part of something bigger than yourself, there's a quiet rebellion in saying, I am already whole. This kind of confidence doesn't come overnight. It's not built on loud declarations or endless self-promotion. It's built slowly, layer by layer, through moments of solitude, through trials, through self-reflection. It's built when you've sat with your pain long enough to make peace with it. When you've been disappointed, rejected, misunderstood, and chose to keep going anyway. That's real strength. That's real power. Standing alone doesn't mean you don't need anyone. It means you don't depend on anyone to define your worth. It means you can walk into a room and not need to be the loudest voice to be heard. It means you're okay with walking away from things that don't serve your soul, even if it means walking alone for a while, because you trust yourself enough to know that solitude is better than settling. There's freedom in that. Freedom from constantly chasing approval. Freedom from bending and breaking just to be accepted. When you've found peace with yourself, you stop looking outward for validation. You start walking with a quiet certainty. You begin making choices that align with your values, not the trends. You start attracting people who are drawn to your authenticity, not your image, not your persona, but the real you. And here's the beautiful part. When you radiate that kind of self-assured energy, you don't need to shout to be seen. You don't need to prove your worth. Your presence speaks before you do. Your silence becomes a language. Your energy fills the space, because there's nothing more magnetic than a person who is grounded, unshaken, and whole within themselves. This doesn't mean you won't have moments of doubt. We all do. Confidence isn't the absence of fear or insecurity. It's the decision to move through it with grace. It's the ability to feel those emotions but not be ruled by them. It's knowing that even on your worst days, your worth doesn't waver. And that confidence, that inner power, it becomes your compass. It guides you through hard decisions. It helps you walk away from toxic relationships, from jobs that drain you, from environments that dim your light. Because when you know your value, you stop trading it for cheap validation. There's a kind of fearlessness that comes with self-trust. You stop needing a map because you are the map. You stop asking for permission and start giving yourself the freedom to explore, to evolve, to expand. You're no longer afraid of being misunderstood or overlooked because you know that your path is your own and not everyone is meant to understand it. And that's okay. The power of being able to stand alone is not in isolation, it's in intention. It means you've chosen solitude when necessary, reflection when needed, and growth always. It means your silence isn't empty, it's full of wisdom. Your distance isn't cold, it's protective. Your boundaries aren't walls, they're doors to self-respect. And when you finally do let people in, it's from a place of love, not lack. You're not looking for someone to complete you because you're already complete. You're not looking for someone to rescue you because you've already saved yourself. You're looking to build, to connect, to grow, not to fill a void. That's when your relationships become healthier, your friendships become deeper, your love becomes real, because it's no longer rooted in fear, in dependence, in desperation. It's rooted in truth, in strength, in clarity. So yes, there is an undeniable power in being able to stand alone. It's not about ego, it's about embodiment. It's about knowing who you are, what you deserve, and where you're headed. It's about walking through the world with quiet strength and knowing that even if no one walks beside you, you'll be just fine. Because the person you've become in solitude, that person is powerful. That person is enough. That person is you,